Okay, thanks for tuning in to this remote meeting about the 705 Warden Housing Now site. My name is Ian and I'm part of the independent facilitation team at Soaring Inc. I'll review the plan for this information session in a moment, but before I do, I'm going to turn it straight over to Mayor John Tory and Councillor Gary Crawford to say a few opening remarks. I know the mayor is online and just about to join. So if the mayor is able to turn his camera and mic on, then we'll start with him. Here we are. Over to you, Mayor Tory.
Okay, you can hear me and see me okay?
Perfectly.
Well, first of all, may I say to all the people online, and I gather there's a fair number, thank you for participating. This is, I think, among the first times we've done this for a public consultation, but it was very important to Councillor Crawford and to myself that we had this opportunity. And, not knowing exactly how long the COVID emergency order is going to last, which precludes us from having meetings of this kind in the normal setting we would do, where we could all be together, we decided to proceed ahead with this. And I'm gratified at the fact that there's a fair number of people online tonight, and there's been some questions submitted in advance, which we will answer. When I say we, there's a collective we, a great staff team and CreateTO team that are here that can deal with a lot of the technical questions, and then Councillor Crawford and myself can deal with some of the other questions that come up. May I just say this? One of the things that the voters told me loud and clear at the time of the last election, which was now almost 2 years ago, was that tackling workforce housing in Toronto and tackling overall the supply of rental housing for people in the city, a city that had become increasingly more expensive, was by far their number one priority. And so I will take the responsibility for moving quickly right after the election, before I'd even been re-sworn in for a second term, to identify a bunch of sites across the city, and they're all across the city in different places, that were close to transit and that represented the best possible opportunity for us to build both market really good quality rental apartments, but also workforce housing at the same time, and do it in a way that people could have jobs nearby, which they will do with the transit building, to have transit nearby, to have shopping nearby, and community facilities nearby. And so I know these things are can be jarring to a community in the context of it representing change, but I hope we're going about this in a responsible manner. I hope we're going about it in a manner that is open and transparent, and this meeting, I hope, is to be a part of that. But we are simply responding by doing this as a council and as a city administration to what the citizens told us loud and clear was their top priority, and we have to get ahead with it quickly. We can't wait another 5 years to have this supply of housing available, all different kinds of housing, workforce housing, market housing, deeply affordable housing, and other places for people who are very vulnerable. So I'm looking forward to the discussion tonight and to answering questions as best I can, together with a very capable staff team. And on that note, I suppose I should just turn it over to Councillor Crawford.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate you coming out tonight to have, I wouldn't say historic kind of community consultation, but definitely one of the first. I think we fixed most of the bugs, and we're out here to have a consultation with the community. And I think I'll echo what you said. I think it was about 10 days after the election, we called me into your office and we congratulated each other. And the first item you talked about was affordable housing and workforce housing. And I was very supportive of your initiative. You brought it to council fairly quickly because it was important, and I respect you for doing that. And again, as we were going through the process through Housing Now, there were a number of sites that were recognized as potential sites across the city. 705 Warden is one of them. And I do support Housing Now. I do support workforce housing and affordable housing. I think all council has supported the initiative because it's an important work that has to get done. But in doing that, what I also support is community consultation. I recognize, being a councillor for many years, that it's critically important that we reach out to communities to, number one, make them understand what potential plans or what potential developments may be happening or impacting their community, and have consultations and meet and speak on a number of times, not just once, not just twice, but in fact, I think 3 times. I think this is actually the 4th community consultation we've had with this community, and I think that's incredibly important. Number one, it provides information. It gives people a forum to have a conversation and to have questions answered, and recognizing that some of these discussions are not easy. There are challenging conversations, but that's no reason not to have them. And I've always been committed to ensuring that we have those conversations with you, the residents and the community of not only Ward 20, but around 705 Warden. And I think we've had some, as I said, challenging meetings, productive meetings, and I think we've had the opportunity to over these 4 meetings to give you a sense of what this project is about. And our planning staff have been excellent, I think, at doing that. And again, they take the lead on this. The mayor and I are here to also listen and answer questions. And hopefully after this, your questions will be answered. Now, recognizing too, we have about an hour. I'm going to cut my remarks short because we want to listen to everybody. But in the event that you don't have the opportunity to have your questions answered, please reach out to planning. Please reach out to my office because I think we're committed to ensuring we provide as much information to you as possible. And even on the consultation, this is not the last consultation we'll be having. And I want to ensure you that we'll continue to have these as this project moves through the planning pipeline on that. So on that again, Mayor, thank you very much for joining us. Planning staff, it's over to you, and thank you for the good work you've been doing so far. And Ian, I guess you're going to be facilitating. It's over to you.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Crawford and Mayor Tory for that opening. So as I said before, my name is Ian and I'm part of the independent facilitation team at Sworn Inc. You might remember our team from the first 2 public consultations about this project last year under very different circumstances. Our team's role is to facilitate and document discussion. We are not here to advocate for any outcome. So you'll see us operating in that capacity over the course of the next hour. The purpose of this information session is to share some information with you about the revised development concept for 705 Warden and to respond to questions. Hopefully you had a chance to review the revised development concept. Some information was shared by the city and CreateTO on their website through both a video and a discussion guide. If you haven't had a chance to review those, you can do that at createto.ca/warden. So our plan for the next hour is to have the city and CreateTO answer some questions about the project. We're going to draw on a combination of questions, both that we received by email and voicemail in advance, and from those of you that are participating online and logged in. And we'll probably go back and forth between the two because we do want to try to give a chance to those of you that have logged in to get questions, but also we want to make sure we're able to respond to some of those that wrote or called in advance. Just so you know, the session is being recorded and all the questions that are being asked and answered are being recorded as well. And CreateTO is going to make a recording of the meeting available after the meeting on the project website. So before we go to the questions, I'm going to introduce the people from the project team that have joined us here. On camera, in addition to the mayor and the councillor, of course, we have Annalise Onina from City Planning. I can give a nod. Perfect. Francis Quashi, also from City Planning.
Hi.
Hi, Francis. Abigail Bond from the city's Housing Secretariat, and Melita Varga from CreateTO. We also have some people from the project team that are off camera and are available as resources if and as needed, depending on the questions that we get asked. Those people are Carlo Bonanni and Don Logie from CreateTO, Jacob Larson from the city's Housing Secretariat, Michael Stevenson from the TTC, and Matthew Wheatley and Jackie Lee, who are from our swear-in facilitation team. So that's the plan. I'm going to now begin with a few questions that we received in advance. We'll do a couple of these. Before I go in, I just want to let you know that if you are participating either on a desktop app or a web browser, you can let us know that you want to have a question answered by using the raise hand feature. The way to do that is to click on either the 3 dots or the silhouette icon, and then there should be a hand icon that looks like my hand that you just have to click to put your hand up, and then we'll see. If you're using a phone or a tablet, it looks a little different, but there should be a silhouette icon. It looks like a little profile picture with 3 lines on it. You tap that, and then there will be a button that says raise hand. Just tap that. And then as soon as we see hands go up, we'll be able to go to you as well. So while you're those that are participating remotely are able to work that out, I'll start with some of the questions we received in advance. So the first question is about parking. And this question came from someone named Chris. Chris said, at previous meetings, participants raised concerns about parking, including the proposed shared parking arrangement. Chris wants to know if there's any update about what kind of shared parking arrangement might be put in place so that residents and commuters still have a place to park. So I think this question is going to be a combination of Francis, who's the local area planner, and Melita from CreateTO. So maybe Francis, we'll start with you first, and then Melita will go to you second.
Sure. Just to introduce myself, I'm Francis Quashi. I'm a senior planner with the City Planning Division, and I've been working on this project from the very onset. So the issue of parking has several layers, and I'm going to touch on a few of them, and then Melita can pick up on the rest of it. So we do recognize that there are existing parking problems in the community, and most of those problems pertain to parking enforcement. City staff have looked at this situation and are coming up with a number of recommendations to improve the existing parking in the community. Now, with respect to the proposal itself, introduces approximately 318 parking spaces. Out of these number of parking spaces, 66 of them will be allocated for visitors. In addition to that, we heard through the consultation process that the community were looking for additional parking to support the Hilltop Community Center. So this proposal introduces an additional 26 parking spaces to the existing 20 parking spaces that currently exist to support the community center. On top of that, the proposal is introducing a new public street, and there's sufficient parking, a lot of parking spaces on the new street to accommodate any extra spaces that the community might require. Beyond that, the proposal itself is a proposal that supports mass transit, and we also recommending different modes of transportation. For example, in terms of pedestrian connectivity, the new streets will have sidewalks that are well integrated into the community. These sidewalks will provide access to Warden, will also provide access through the new development along the edge of the Taylor Massey Creek that connects you back onto Warden again. We are also looking at improvements on the public boulevard along Warden, provide easier access and connection to the Warden subway station. And so at this juncture, I will turn it over to Melita to speak to the issues pertaining to commuter parking.
Thanks, Francis. In addition to providing parking to support this development, the proposed zoning bylaw will enable paid public parking to be included within the development, which may also serve commuters using Warden Station. A shared parking arrangement that utilizes vacant parking spaces during the day to support public parking demand is proposed. This will enable us to most efficiently use the parking on site. A shared parking arrangement will preserve a portion of the public parking while providing an adequate supply of parking for residents and visitors of the new development. CreateTO and the city will work with the selected development team to identify and finalize a parking model that will work best for the 705 Warden site. Further details will be available once the development partner is confirmed. Thank you.
Okay, so a couple different answers there about the parking, both from a local perspective as well as the shared parking for commuters. We do have another question. This one is about affordable housing more generally. This may be one, I expect Abigail will answer this a bit, but the mayor and the councillor may also want to weigh in on this one. Question is, COVID-19 has underscored that there's a real need for affordable housing, with the city moving some of those in need into hotels. So given that need, why is the proportion of affordable housing so low on city-owned land? And why is the city targeting what appear to be young professionals instead of people with a deeper need? So not sure if the mayor wants to start off that one, and then we can work our way through the others.
Sure. I will start by simply saying that all of our affordable housing programs taken in totality, housing now being one of them that allowed us to make fast progress on pieces of public land that we had available that were transit proximate and so on, they cover a range of income groups. And so there are affordable housing units, even some, in different developments that are deeply affordable and some that are affordable. And affordable in the context of the workforce housing concept says that, for example, there are lots of people who we badly need to work in the city. Take an early childhood educator, makes about $35,000. A licensed practical nurse makes about $50,000. If you do the math of after tax, what the people in those professions have left to pay for rent, you'd find Toronto a very difficult city in which to live. So we have a need of affordable housing for them, workforce housing, that is going to be at a closer to the market rate, about 80%. And then we have, even in this development, other units that will be allocated to people at 40% of the average market rent. So for those ones are meant for people who have lower incomes in jobs that are in lower incomes than the ones that I mentioned. And we have deeply affordable units in different developments across the city. And this is not the only housing initiative, the only workforce housing or deeply affordable housing initiative that we have. There are many all over the place. With respect to the proportion of the units of the overall development that are taken up by workforce housing, I would simply say to you that that is a matter that we have to balance the interests of the community. We have to balance the financial model of the development, because we do these in conjunction with both for-profit and nonprofit developers, and the development has to work overall in terms of being the right kind of combination of the public amenities that are being done here, which are significant in this area, in this development. Secondly, the market rent units, and thirdly, of course, the workforce affordable housing units. And the number, we try and push it as high as we can, but there is a point at which you have to sort of accommodate the fact that you are still trying to get, in effect, a developer to build the affordable workforce housing units for you, and that there's a point beyond which they won't be able to do that and sustain the project financially. So there is a number. The number varies from time to time. We're trying to push that percentage as high as we can in these developments because of the need being so great.
Thank you, Mayor Tory. Abigail, I know you had a housing secretariat lens as well to bring to that question, so maybe I'll just open the floor back up to you before we go to the third questions, and then we'll go to the phones. I do see at least one or two people with their hands raised.
Thanks, Ian, and thanks for the invite to tonight's unique event. I guess I want to agree with the person who asked the question, in the sense that COVID-19 has really shown to all of us the importance of housing and how difficult it would be to self-isolate and physical distance when you don't have a front door that you can close. And that's why our housing plan, as Mayor Tory has said, really encompasses a broad variety of housing options and solutions for many different people living and working in our city. Of which the Housing Now is a very important program. As part of that, it's going to deliver almost 4,000 new market rental units. It's going to make a valuable contribution to many of the people who need to stay and work in our city, and it's going to contribute to an overall target of over 40,000 new rental homes that we need to see. But the housing plan, as we've already talked about, doesn't stop there. It does go on to say that there are specific needs for people with very low income, and 18,000 of those units are highlighted to be needed for supportive housing. So for people who are experiencing homelessness and who are on very low income. And so to complement the Housing Now program, the city does have other endeavors that we're trying to bring to fruition. And so the latest one of those that we brought to council a couple of weeks ago is the Modular Housing pilot program. And so that's 110 units to be opened later this year. And that will address the very specific needs of people with chronic homelessness issues and on very low income. So there is an important array of different solutions that we're trying to progress. This is one key part of that. And as we've discussed, it does very much rely on the individual economics of each project. And we as a city can't do this alone. We rely very much on other levels of government to support us with the kind of investment needed to make these units more deeply affordable. So we can add affordability moving forward if we can get that additional government funding, either through capital investment or rent subsidies.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Anne. Thanks, Abby. So the third question, and then I will go to those that have got a few people now that have got their hands up. This question is about schools, and it comes from Dalton. So the question is, how do schools fit into these plans? Since the development is going to result in more families living in the area, is there enough capacity at the nearby schools like St. Joachim's or General Brock? Or is there some other plan for schools to add capacity? So this is a city planning question. I'm going to throw it to Annalee to start off.
Okay, thanks, Ian. And thank you, Dalton, for your question. You're right, schools are a very important part of the community infrastructure that's going to serve the people living in this new development. And as part of the standard approach to development review, we have circulated the 705 Warden application to both the Toronto District School Board and the Toronto Catholic District School Board. The Toronto District School Board doesn't currently have a school located for this or identified for this development, and that is simply because the area is currently not a residential area, it is a parking lot. So they will take into consideration the new pupils and students that will come out of this development as they continue their review of the pupil accommodation process for South Scarborough. The Toronto Catholic District School Board has indicated that they do have sufficient capacity in the high schools for any students wishing to attend TDSB schools who will be living at 705 Ward.
Okay, thank you, Annalie. And just for future questions, so you might need to pull your mic a little bit closer to your mouth. It was okay, but it was fading in and out a little bit, at least on my end. So I do see a few hands up, so I'm going to go to those participating online. So I'm going to unmute you. I'll say your name, and then you can ask your question, and then we'll remute so that the members, the panelists that are here can answer. So I'm going to go to the person named Jennifer. Jennifer, you have been unmuted. You can ask your question now.
Hi there. I'm just wondering, how is the TTC going to be able to handle the influx of people coming into the station? I've mentioned in other meetings that it's at capacity. I can't even get a seat from Warden. So it's very, very stifling. And especially in these physical distancing situations, that's going to even be harder to manage. I'm just wondering what can be done to manage that.
Great, thank you for the question, Jennifer. So the question is about TTC capacity. I might start this one with Francis as the local area planner, and then we do have someone from the TTC on the line, Michael, so maybe we'll go to you second. But Francis, if you want to begin from how you would think about transit capacity from a development application standpoint, and then Michael, we can go to you next.
Hi again, and thanks for the question. In terms of what the proposal brings to the table is improving connectivity to the subway station in the form of providing pedestrian connections to the existing land bridge that crosses over the Taylor Massey Creek. Again, as I mentioned in my previous answer, we're looking at ways of improving the sidewalk and the public boulevard along Warden to connect to the subway station as well. So from a pedestrian standpoint, that is what we're looking at. In terms of improving overall vehicular access to and from the side, and also potentially to the subway station, we're also looking at a potential signalized intersection at Roper Road and at Warden. So those are some of the strategies on the table that we're looking at to help facilitate, access to and from the subway station.
Okay, thanks, Francis. And Michael, if you want to unmute, and I know Jennifer's question, it was helpful, Francis, to understand the access standpoint. Michael, I know Jennifer's question really focused on the capacity of transit. So how the TTC is thinking about transit capacity given the potential for an increase in demand on the subway as a result of this development.
Yes, hi, can you hear me? I hope, yep, great. Hi, it's Michael Stevenson from the TTC. I'm Director of Planning and Approvals with the Property Planning and Development Department. So I have been involved in this project from the get-go. We do appreciate your question with respect to capacity. So we have reviewed the capacity of the Bloor Danforth line 2, and presently there is capacity. However, we do appreciate that there is a desire to look at capacity improvements. So in the medium term, we do have a project to undertake the line 2 capacity enhancement study. So that's looking at the projected future demand, including demand that would be generated from this site and in the larger area. And that study would identify the physical changes that would be needed on line 2 to carry more capacity. So some of those things are station capacity as well as train capacity. The line 2 trains at some point will reach their life cycle and will need to be replaced. Those programs are being rolled out and are being looked at, and we do appreciate the concern. The second part of that question was with respect to COVID and the transit capacity. This stuff is very topical. I'm not involved in those discussions. However, I know that the corporation is taking that very seriously and looking at what are the next steps with respect to carrying passengers in this time. So I hope that answers the question, and I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Great. Thanks very much, Michael. So I'm going to go to the next person. Oh, yes, Mayor Tory.
So I just want to say this. Look, Gary knows because he works with me a lot. I'm very, very honest about these things. One of the toughest issues we're grappling with right now is what to do after the sort of pandemic emergency period is over, because the fact is that even when we get back like 20% of our ridership, that starts to pose a problem for the physical distancing. And I think you'll know that in the spirit of honesty, there's only so many trains we can add to a subway tunnel. There's only so many trains we have. We're ordering more, but you know, it is one of those things where it's going to be a challenge. We're going to have to find other ways to deal with this. But you know, so it doesn't address the access and egress, which I think were well addressed by the others. But I'm just being honest in saying that there's going to be some adjustments we're going to have to make in people's work hours potentially, when people go back to work instead of teleworking and things like that. But we don't have a simple answer to that question simply because this is uncharted territory for us in terms of having to develop a plan that would, you know, cause people to be back on transit in the same numbers as they were before and still be able to keep a distance. So there's going to be various things we're going to have to do, but it is a huge, complicated challenge for us that does not have an easy answer, no matter who tells you that they have one.
Thanks, Mayor Tory. So I'm going to go to the next person on the phone. This is Kathy. Kathy, you are unmuted, so please ask your question.
Thanks. So I guess first I just want to start with some commentary because you indicate that this is consultation, but you've had 3 with the community. And for the most part, our community doesn't really like this happening. And what it felt like for the last 3-4 meetings is this is information. We're telling you how it's going to be. You know, I don't feel like we're really benefiting from this. I certainly don't want to see more increases on this site. This is the 3rd time that we've had increased housing now. It's up to 250. We've got larger buildings. I know people are pushing for more density in our area. We don't have the capacity for it. This is the first site you're building on. It is important that you proceed with caution on this site. We are the guinea pig, so as much pressure as there is, I really insist that this does not get larger. Parking, it was addressed in that they're going to have some paid parking spots. Strategically, she didn't indicate the number of parking spots. We're talking about 600 new families to an already congested area, so there's no way your parking is going to be resolved. We don't have the schools, we don't have walkability. We're going to have increased traffic. Not to mention, we don't really want this. So what is in it for us? We're looking for, in hopes of getting more businesses here. We all wanted something that, you know, is necessary to the community. Places like medical offices, grocery stores. Has the city done anything to facilitate commerce? Have they tried to get businesses to come to the community? What are we going to get out of this? All I see is we're giving something up.
Got it.
You know, this area is becoming worse and worse. We have a homeless center here. I don't want to see a ghetto in my neighborhood that I love.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kathy. There's a lot there. So I've put you back on mute, and there are a few points to summarize there. I mean, I think Kathy reiterated some of the concerns we heard earlier about infrastructure, and whether that was transportation and otherwise. But I think the overarching theme to Kathy's question is, what are the benefits for the local community, and what steps are the city and CreateTO taking to mitigate the risks, or what she understands to be the risks associated with the development. So yes, Gary.
I'm just wondering if I could just jump in just to start the conversation. And first of all, Kathy, I want to thank you for coming. And you're right. You know, the comments you are bringing, I have to admit, you know, they're there, and the community has them. Also, number one, recognizing that even when this community was built, I would know better, I think 15 or 20 years ago, part of the plan, part of the larger zoning plan that our planning department put together was eventually developing the parking lots of the TTC. So that was always part of the plan. Now, we didn't know what it would look like, we didn't know the density, but that was always an understanding that there would be development happening in there. With regard to the consultation, and consultations sometimes are challenging, and I could appreciate that you would think that this is a done deal. And I know I've heard that before from a number of the consultations. I mean, there will be a development going in there, and I think I've been very clear, and I think the mayor would agree with me that, and planning a development will be going in there. And what we're looking at now is, what does it look like? What are the capacities? And those have actually brought changes. So as we were having the conversation, I think the first one that I can recall was the parking for the community center. There was a real concern. about people not being able to park. So of course, out of the consultation that was brought to the process, we're looking at expanding. When we're looking at parkland, I guess there was a concern, of course, is that we have a small little park out there. We want to continue having parkland. So as we went through this process, parkland is a priority, ensuring that we are doubling the parkland priority space. Now, recognizing too, on the other side of this, when we're looking at advocates who are supporting and wanting more affordable housing, more workforce housing, more deep affordable housing in the city, there are plans out there to suggest, well, we should be putting in 1,500 units in it. We should be capitalizing or maximizing on the density opportunities. I don't agree with that. I feel that we have to figure out where the balance is. And I think that's what we're starting to see. And there is a bit of give and take, but I just wanted to recognize that as we go through consultation, there are opportunities for change. But as I said, I mean, yes, a development is there. And for those who are, I guess, advocating for no development to keep it the way it is, unfortunately, as much as I would like to say, yes to that, we have to recognize that the development is going in there, and how and what it looks like is part of this process that we're dealing with right now.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford. And I might, Annalee, if there's anything you wanted to add from a city planning perspective in terms of what benefits the community might see as a result of this development, because I know that's very much in city planning's work as well.
Right. And can I just test my mic? Can you hear me? Great. Yes, just to pick up on what the councillor said, he's absolutely right. You have the context that you can see on the ground today and what City Council has approved and has been in place. The plan has actually been in place since 2005. So our task is to create a development that does make that contribution that you were looking for. And in so doing, we've been able to provide a space that's going to accommodate retail, which could accommodate a range of uses in that retail space, a new 62-space childcare, and again, that supports the families who are also looking for affordable housing in this area. The park will have its own consultation session. So the detailed design for the park will be something that will be run by the Parks, Forestry, and Recreation Division. And one thing about the design, I'm aware that there's concern that it's gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. We are making best efforts through this during COVID-19 to continue to share how that development will look. And so one of the changes we have made is that we've heard from people that did not like the height around the buildings closest to Roper Road. So we have brought that down, and we are creating more intense uses further south towards Warden Subway Station. The site plan control consultation that will occur later on in this process will give you a much clearer picture on the detailed design of the buildings and the public spaces in the development.
Great. Thanks, Annalee. So I'm going to go to one more on the phone, and then we'll return to some of those questions that we were asked in advance. So I see Paul here has a question. So Paul, you're unmuted, and you can ask your question now.
Yes, thank you. This might be in contradiction to the previous question, but I was just wondering if the planners have looked at the number of units and the number of residents required to support a decent sized grocery store and other retail and other amenities that could actually provide something for giving back to the community. I'm not sure that the number of residents currently being proposed, based on the research that I've done, I'm not certain that the density being proposed is even enough to support the amenities needed to provide back to the community what they're looking for, what they don't have now. There are a lot of things missing in the community that could be provided.
Great, thank you, Paul, for the question. So I think that's probably first to Annalee to talk a bit about how you have been thinking about whether there's sufficient density to support the retail you just spoke about. And Melita, if there's anything you want to add from the CreateTO perspective after, I think that would make sense too.
That's right. The retail is not a large-scale retail. It's a retail that can serve the community. And one thing that we haven't spoken about at length today is that there is an employment use on the site. And that's one of the things that makes this truly a mixed-use community and a mixed-use development. And that employment site will bring people into the area who patronize the retail and add vitality. We see the benefits to the community as not just retail, but of course also the new 62-space childcare and the expansion to the park. So there's a number of community infrastructure pieces and also the retail. that will contribute to the community.
So I will add to Paul's point about needing the density on the retail, and I think this was a question that came up in the councillors roundtable session last year, and with my background in leasing, I can tell you that looking at density is a very critical component for any tenant, commercial tenant, retail tenant, when they're looking at a site. So they are looking at immediate population. They're looking at competition within a kilometer radius, but to 3 kilometers to 5 kilometers, when they're factoring in their decision making for where to locate. I will say that the retail space that we've shown in our latest designs can accommodate a small grocer. Should a small grocer be interested in leasing out the space, it can accommodate that use. So we have incorporated that into the planning and the thinking, and that is really the best we could do.
Okay, thanks, Melita. So I'm going to go back to some of the questions that were sent in advance, and then we'll come back to the phones or the online participants for a couple more questions. So this next question is a question about why this site's been selected. This one came from Chris. The question is short, which is, why is this site being targeted for this kind of development, especially when there's already affordable housing quite nearby to the site? So this question, this can go really to any number of you. I might begin again with Annalee, but Councillor Crawford or Mayor Tory, if you have anything to add to this as well, please just let us know, and we'll make sure to go to you as well.
Okay. Well, the Housing Now program generally is about using city-owned land near transit to provide high-quality developments that serve a range of income types. And you are right, there is other forms of affordable housing in the immediate vicinity. And as Abigail mentioned at the beginning, it is part of a range of approaches to affordable housing that the city is taking. Our focus is that the development is well designed and supports all elements of the community, from community infrastructure to affordable housing to transportation issues. And with that, I think I'll pass it over to our elected officials.
Well, I will simply add to that a very excellent explanation that we have picked, in this case, 11 sites right across the city for just this program. We have another program called Open Doors, which has picked another multitude of sites. And we have more to come in Housing Now. And the reason for all of that, and the reason it's across the city in places that are transit proximate, as Annalee said, is because we have a drastic shortage that's very bad for the economy, very bad for the economy of the city and the continued success of the city. We cannot have a city socially or economically where certain groups of people that are even in very secure, good paying jobs, but that pay what they pay, cannot afford to live in the city anymore. It will not be a city that's healthy socially. It will not be a city that's healthy economically. And when we look for sites, we're not sort of saying, well, let's pick as many sites as we can in Scarborough or North York or Etobicoke. We're taking sites across the city, including downtown, that are available to us, that are transit proximate, that have some development potential in terms of the ability to put up housing. And of course, this is a mix of workforce housing and market housing. This is going to be a fantastic neighborhood full of great people. It's going to provide housing, I believe, for a lot of people who may now live in single family homes that want to stay in the neighborhood, and we'll have a really high quality building with great amenities to move into. So it's just one of those things where, I just think this is going to be a superb high quality development with a lot of amenities in addition to the community center. And I think it will, by the way, attract. There's a new model of grocery stores that are coming now. I've heard that being discussed tonight that actually are much smaller. I used to be on the board of a grocery store company. I can tell you, I'll phone up the people that I used to be on the board with and tell them this is a great neighborhood in which they should put one of the new model stores. And I think the business models are such they can do that now. We shouldn't be pessimistic about that if that's something that's needed. So I just say, though, that we are having this development across the city, and even come to my office, or not so much Councillor Crawford's. This very development was the subject of some of the housing advocates coming to my office to say we weren't doing anywhere near enough on this site. And we had to establish that balance between what was appropriate for the community based on expert planning advice and so on, and what other people thought we should do in terms of being more ambitious about it. And even now, there are people still complaining we're not doing enough, let alone too much. So this is part of the job we have to do in making difficult decisions to address issues that have to be addressed.
Thanks, Mayor Tory. I'll go to the next question, which is this question came from James. It's about the TTC and specifically the TTC building. So, Michael, I think this is going to be a question for you. The question is why, and I think this builds a little bit off some of the points that the mayor was just making in terms of the range of perspectives that we're hearing about this proposal. Question is, why is there a TTC office or operations center in a separate building? James suggests that use could instead be incorporated into one of the other buildings, and that would free up the land where the existing or where the office and operations center is now for even more affordable units. So that's probably, Michael, a question over to you first, and if others have any information about that, they can share it as well.
Sure. Yeah, it's something that we've been hearing about this site, about the TTC use on this site. I appreciate the question. We have been working very closely with city planning as well as CreateTO on the design of the building. We have had lots of detailed discussions about the height of the building and potential uses on top of the building. There is consideration needed for transition into the neighborhood. So CreateTO and city planning had advised us that the building cannot be built any higher than what has been shown. Therefore, there will be no other uses added to the top of it. And it is placed there because it is a natural transition from the higher density residential in the south to the lower density residential in the north. So that's my answer. I don't know if Melita or Annalie or maybe Don want to weigh in on that at all.
Yeah, just to add to that, Francis here, senior planner with the City Planning Division, just to add to that, he's quite right when he says that we're looking at, a trajectory of heights, lower scale development and having higher densities and taller buildings closer to the Warden subway station. So the very location of that building, based on the multiplicity of city building objectives, is essentially the right place. And also just to bring everyone's attention to the fact that the existing zoning bylaw for the community permits the TTC building on that site. And through various iterations and discussions with the TTC, again, we felt that was the most appropriate place for that building.
Okay, thank you, Francis. I'll do one more from the questions that were asked in advance, and then we'll go back to the phones for a few more. So this question is an environmental question. The question comes from Sai, and the question is, well, it begins with a statement, which is that it's common to find garbage in the riverbanks in Massey Creek. So the question is, what steps are being taken to prevent river pollution or any costly cleanup of Massey Creek as a result of this development? So I think maybe we'll start, Melita, with you, and then Annalie, if there's anything to add from city planning, that might also be a good place for you to jump in.
Sure, thanks, Ian. That's a really good question, and of course, something a lot of people are concerned about. So Taylor Massey Creek and the surrounding area is actually regulated by Toronto and Region Conservation Authority, which is also known as the TRCA. And Real Estate Services is responsible for maintaining those standards. So we'll check in with them on the waste that you've seen there in the creek. The site plan illustrates the required 8-meter stable top of slope allowance and an additional 10-meter access allowance north of the creek for its protection. So these are methods that are put into place to protect the creek, and you can see that on the site plan. As with any development, construction measures and long-term measures will be taken in to ensure that there are no pollutants entering the creek during these times.
Thanks, Melita. Annalie, was there anything you wanted to add?
I'm just going to pass it over to Francis, actually, as the area planner.
Sure. Just to add to what Melita said, just so everyone knows, the existing Warden Hilltop Community Center is one of the first public buildings in the city of Toronto to get a Silver LEED certification. So the environmental standards for that particular building is very high. Now, the proposed development that we're looking at looks at complementing that very high environmental standards. And some of the strategies that we're looking at is how we control stormwater on the site, terms of the quality and the quantity that goes into the city system, and also the rest that goes into the ravine to kind of support the ecosystem of the Massey Creek. Again, we're also looking at the new streets that we're introducing to the community, that those streets are supported by quite a significant number of street trees, and those street trees are also have to be supported by the appropriate amount of soil volume. So that also contributes to the ecosystem in the surrounding community. Now, in terms of the design of the roof structure of these buildings, they have to comply with the city's Toronto Green standards, and also the Toronto Green Roofs bylaw, whereby at least 50% of the roof has to have the capacity to have a green roof. So that's also a factor in contributing to environmental sustainability of the site. Now, in terms of the actual construction and building materials, we're also encouraging the potential development partner to come up with building materials that are environmentally supportive as well. In terms of the overall package, there's a bunch of things that we've looked at to ensure that this proposal supports the Massey Creek. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you,
And
Francis.
Ian, just one thing. Once the development is complete, people who are living in the area and living in the development can enjoy it more with the new pathway that is going to be going along the creek, and let people enjoy the nature that is being restored along the slope of the banks there.
Great. Thanks, Annalie. So I'm going to go back to the phones. I see Mark has his hand up. So Mark, I've unmuted you, and please go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you. First of all, I'm somewhat surprised that Kathy, who spoke earlier, was referring to relatively low density workforce housing as a ghetto or a possible ghetto, and nobody seemed to respond to that in any way. We've added 25 units of affordable housing to this site in 3 public meetings. It's the lowest density of any of the 3 TTC parking lot sites in CreateTO. Victoria Park, which is only 2 acres, also in Councillor Crawford's ward, is carrying 254 affordable housing units. Wilson Heights is over 500 on a similarly sized piece of land. So I guess my question to the mayor and Councillor Crawford is that they have said full steam ahead on affordable housing. That's what was said during Councillor Crawford's town hall. If it takes us 1.5 years to add 25 affordable housing units, how are we full steam ahead? How can we get meaningful affordable housing density, workforce housing density on this site and the other sites? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question, Mark. Mayor Tory and Councillor Crawford, that was addressed to you. So if you'd like to begin, I think the question is how is this project seen as making full steam ahead, given that 25 units of affordable housing have been added over the course of the year and a half or so of public consultation?
We've added to the number that were there before, and I guess I won't repeat what I said earlier on. It's a very difficult challenge that we have. First of all, I think the bulk of the affordable housing units that will be added in total in all of our affordable housing initiatives and workforce housing initiatives across the city will be significant. And I would just say that we have to accommodate. I mean, we've had many people say tonight that the very fact any were added as opposed to subtracted, nobody actually said that, but was a lack of consultation on our part. This just underlines the difficulty of being in public office. And Mark, I'm familiar with your views. You were the person I was referring to, came to my office and said that we had nowhere near enough affordable housing, and you're entirely consistent this evening. But we also have to listen to other people that have other views and take into account other kinds of considerations. And I think the very fact we're having this discussion, which is going to have hundreds of affordable housing units on the site, is a tribute to the success this program will represent. We'll proceed ahead with it, and we will be building thousands of affordable housing units elsewhere and workforce housing units elsewhere in the city. But the numbers are going to be what they're going to be in order to make the project work, because we also have to take into account the need for us to have partners in helping us to construct these developments, because it can't all be done by the government. So I'm overall wanting people to look at the record across the city. And I think, we're doing something here that is going to be very significant, both in terms of a new rental housing development for people who have market rent apartments in their sites, and workforce housing, affordable housing that is going to provide opportunities for hundreds of people and families to become a part of this neighborhood.
Yeah, just let me add that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. we also have to look at each individual site individually. Number one, from a planning perspective, and I'm sure Francis or Annalie can talk about the specifics of this site and why they are looking at the kind of densities. And it's different than other, even down the street at Victoria Park, there's different ones. But it is a balance, and recognizing decisions have to be made, recognizing that affordable housing is important, and I support it wholeheartedly. I think the council unanimously supported moving forward on our affordable housing plan. But there also has to be a balance when we're looking at the needs of communities all over this city. I think it's important that we, again, have these discussions with the community, figure out where that balance is, and move forward. Again, recognizing that when you look at balance, you recognize there'll be people on both sides that won't necessarily be happy, but in any kind of conversation, we try to figure out where that middle ground is to best support the needs of what we're doing in the city on affordable housing and workforce housing, along with the communities, the individual communities in these areas across the city. And you have to look at them all differently. I know Victoria Park down the street that I was involved in is a different site compared to this site. There are different plans, as I said, there are different planning components to that. We need to recognize that as we move one by one. But when you look at the collective, we are increasing affordable housing in the city, and we are doing it considerably in this term that the mayor and I are involved in, than I think in the history of where the city has been over the last number of years.
Thanks, Councillor Crawford. Maybe I'll go to one more on the phone unless anyone else wanted to jump in on that. Okay, great. Because I know we've got just under 10 minutes left, and we did want to spend a few minutes at the end just talking about next steps and letting you know how you can follow up after the meeting. So I'm going to go to Erin. Erin's had her hand up for a bit. Erin, you are unmuted. You can please ask your question.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So my hand has been up for a while. I kind of have a two-part question that's partially been answered. So I'll kind of adjust on the fly. My concern is around the area. It's similar to Kathy's comments. Essentially, this is a developing area, and they're continuing to, before COVID, we were continuing to build townhouses here that cost up to $800,000. I've spent my entire life saving and put all of my life savings into buying a home here. Whether you want to admit it or not, this project will affect our property value. So I stand to lose equity. And this is really all I have at this point. So my initial question was, why here and not continue to build somewhere like Victoria Park that already has affordable housing, and kind of take this developing area and potentially impact the value it already has? And then the second part of that is, if we choose to sell our homes because we are not willing to take the risk on losing this equity, are we going to be able to wait for the housing market to recover from COVID before we start building this new development?
Okay, thank you, Erin. I've muted you. I think there, like you said, there was a bit of a two-parter. I think the first question was about property value, and to try to summarize the question is how did the city, or are the city and CreateTO thinking about property value impacts associated with this proposal? And the second one, which is really connected, which is if we choose to sell our homes before the COVID pandemic subsides, I guess there's more of there's a bit of a question, which is how is that going to be taken into account, because the housing market may not recover for a while as a result of COVID. So that may be a good one for Abigail to begin, and then we'll go to others as needed.
Thanks, Ian. Can you hear me? I think I'm off mute. Yeah. Well, thank you for the question. I'm sure it's a concern that many residents in your community have. My experience of developing affordable housing over many years is that developments like this make a significant contribution towards the communities in which they end up. They're providing vital homes for essential workers who are needed in your community and across this city. And there is no evidence to show that key worker housing, rental housing results in any loss of equity or any loss of property values in community. In fact, some of the most recent research on this topic coming out of the province of BC, who recently did research about several hundred, the development of several hundred new affordable homes, and they did extensive research about the health and housing outcomes of that housing, and also community safety outcomes, and also property values, shows that there was no loss in property values as a result of those developments going into communities. So we're proposing this development in order to benefit the community and provide important places for our friends, members of our family to live, especially young people when they're starting out in life and working in important jobs in the city. So we feel that this development, the inclusion of affordable housing, will really benefit this community and our city.
Thanks, Abigail. Did anyone else want to weigh in on that, or if not, I can begin talking about the next steps because I know others have to. We're just a few minutes away from the end of the meeting. Okay.
Just for Ian, just from a planning standpoint, and I think Councillor Gary Crawford has touched on the fact that the Warden Woods Community Secondary Plan has always envisaged this area or this particular site to be a site for significant intensification. And the type of development being looked at as mixed use, mixed income, transit supportive development. So we are essentially consistent with the vision, the principles that can be found in the Warden Woods Community Secondary Plan. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Francis. So Matthew, if you could bring up the slide that brings up the contact information for how people can share additional feedback afterwards. That would be a big help. I'll begin to describe the next steps from our team's perspective, from a facilitation team, and then I'm going to hand it, excuse me, I'll hand it over to Annalie to say to talk about the next steps in terms of the project, and then to the councillor and the mayor for any closing remarks. So thank you very much, of course, for all your questions. I know we weren't able to get to all of them. There were about 8 or 10 other people that had their hands up, so we worked to get through as many as we could, but you can still share any additional questions or feedback after the session. So the contact information is on the screen, but we know some people are on the phone as well, so I'll read it out just for those that are on the phone. You can share any additional questions by this Friday, May 15th, or feedback. The email address to do that is housingnow@toronto.ca. The phone number is 416-338-3105. And the website, which has the video update that has more information and the discussion, is CreateTO.ca/warden. That same website is also where we are going to post the recording of this meeting, as well as eventually the meeting summary that we're going to be preparing as a result of this discussion, which will include all the questions that we received and the answers given. So as with the other meetings that you would have seen us facilitate around this process, we'll be preparing a draft summary of the discussion and sharing it with everyone that provided a contact address when they're logged in. So if you provided an email address when you logged in, we'll use that to follow up with the draft meeting summary. If you're on the phone and would like to be able to provide contact information to us, please do that either by writing housingnow@toronto.ca or phoning us at 416-338-3105, and we'll make sure we add your contact to that distribution list. So that's it from our team. I'll just say thanks very much. I know this is a different type of meeting than usual for this, and I'll turn it over to Annalie from the city to talk about the next steps from the city's perspective, and then the mayor and the council.
Okay, thanks very much, Ian. We look forward to your comments. And just so everyone is aware, we are currently planning on presenting a proposed zoning bylaw and staff report that reflects the revised development concept to June. All information is on the city clerk's website, and any changes to that date that may result from changes because of COVID-19 will be posted to the CreateTO.ca/warden website so that people are aware. As of now, we're at June, and that will be available through the city's normal channels for community councils, committees and
Thanks. Councillor Crawford, Mayor Tory, any closing words?
Well, can I just say, first of all, thank you, Ian, for doing a very capable job of running the meeting. And thank you to our city staff for being here and answering these questions. But most of all, thanks to the people who took part in this unusual way of doing public consultation. But certainly it was very useful to me to hear the concerns that people had. When I worked for Ted Rogers running the Rogers companies, we used to have this circle that we had, and the circle had 4 quadrants in it: too early, too late, in terms of when you would address an issue or when you get something done, and then too much and too little. And we used to say that the challenge for us was to try to hit the dot right in the center, so that you were neither too early, too late, and you didn't have too much or too little. And he was an incredibly brilliant entrepreneur, very impatient. But in politics, in public life, it's much the same thing. You've heard tonight on the consultation, there were some people who said we had too little in the way of workforce housing and too little density on the site. Other people who said we had too much. We weren't into a discussion of too early or too late. I will just say to you that I will continue to listen. This, as you've heard, is not the end of a process. It is partway through a process. There are things that I won't get into it here, but there are even things on this site that I'm not 100% in agreement with, and that I will continue to discuss. I don't have absolute power to sort of say these things will be one way or another. We have a process for that. I will tell you that Gary Crawford has been a person who has been in my office 50 times to talk about this and to express concerns and to make sure that your views are taken into account. And I take this consultation tonight very meaningfully in terms of the issues that were raised. And I'm pledged to him this afternoon. I said I'd come back out for a meeting when we can have one in person if we are going to have another one. I will help. If it's a grocery retailer that we need to make the neighborhood a bigger success, I've already said to him, I will help because I can with that kind of thing. There's a business model that can work. So I just want people to please be understanding of the fact we have a workforce affordable housing crisis in the city, and that it is going to profoundly affect the social and economic well-being of the city going forward, and that I was told by the people and elected by the people to address it, and I will be held accountable for what we do in terms of the care and whatnot that we are trying to take, but you can't always be right in the eyes of the people on that sort of too early, too late, too much, too little sort of conundrum we face. So I thank you very much for your understanding. I think this is going to be a great addition to the neighborhood with all the amenities that are coming with it. And I think we're going to try our best to make sure we take your concerns into account, all the ones we've heard expressed tonight. And again, I thank Gary Crawford for his leadership in standing up for the people that are his constituents and certainly making us aware of their views. And we will continue to consider those and do what we can to make this a development that has the confidence of the local residents. Thank you.
Thank you, and Mr. Mayor, thank you very much for coming out tonight. It's very much appreciated for me and, of course, all the staff, and I'm sure the people who are listening here tonight. And I just want to echo, and Ian, again, you've done a great job at facilitating a difficult conversation and recognizing that there are balances back and forth on trying to figure that. I see that in all the community consultation I do, but what's critically important is we do consult. Even if we don't like hearing what people are saying, it's important that we listen and we do react as best we can as we're going through the planning process. But I just really wanted to end on one comment of who will be living here. I've lived in and around this community most of my life, a little south of here, but I've represented it as a councillor for 10 years and as a school board trustee for 7. So I know the area very intimately, and I know the residents. I've met many of them. Who's going to be living in these buildings? Number one, it's going to be market rent. A big component, the majority of the people in this building will be market rent individuals, families, and market rent, recognizing that we don't have enough rental in the city. So I think that's going to provide an opportunity for people. But it's also going to be housing people like daycare workers and receptionists. My daughter, who's 25 years old, university educated, actually went back to college and is doing 2 part-time jobs right now, works in the arts sector, makes about $28,000, $27,000 or so a year. She's the person that we are looking to have in this building, into these buildings all across the city. Again, working hard, working really hard, but unfortunately in today's day and age in a city as expensive as Toronto, still struggles. And there are a lot of people out there. So I think this Housing Now development in 705 Warden will attract those individuals and those people who need that kind of support or help in trying to afford, reasonable housing as they start looking at that next steps, going from, rental, being able to save for a house. And I said, well, my daughter's exactly doing. She's trying to find a place that's affordable and decent and reasonable, but at the same time saving for that eventuality where she will hopefully buy a house. So I look at this as a very positive aspect, not only for the community, recognizing that we still aren't at the end of the process. We're still looking at some changes, and I'll be reaching out again to the community prior to June. It's going to be a bit of a challenge, of course, in the environment we're in, but my commitment is to reach out to you. I have no problem speaking to community members on a one-on-one basis. If you call my office, it'll be virtual, of course. We may be able to do a number of you to have smaller conversations. I could always pull in some staff on that, but my commitment to you, as it has been always, is to reach out to you and to consult and to talk about this important issue. So on that, again, Ian, I just want to, and all the staff, planning from CreateTO, thank you for the work you've done. And again, Mayor Tory, thank you for participating with us.
Great. Thank you very much, everybody. So we're going to end the meeting now, and please visit the website, createto.ca/warden, to follow up with any additional information and to contact us if you'd like. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you.